I call the August 11, 2015 Brattleboro Selectboard meeting to order. Has the meeting been officially warned?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. I want to greet everybody who's watching us on TV, probably not live,
Correct.
but who's watching us with a time delay recording. I want to greet the members of the press who are here in attendance. Thanks for being here, and everybody else who's in attendance. It's going to be a relatively short public meeting, and then we're going to go into executive session to do some substantial consultation that can't happen in public session, although we hope to be going into public session soon on some of these issues. And so I call the meeting to order. There doesn't appear to be anybody here for public comment about something that's not on the agenda. So the first matter on the agenda under unfinished business is the National Endowment for the Arts, the NEA, Our Town Grant. So because I was not here.
Briefly, you're not going to go through any of the regular select board comments?
Generally, we would not in a special meeting. I can if you want. Is there something you want to say?
There was one thing. Yeah,
Go for it.
Just wanted to ask the board to agree to ask the town manager to fly the flag at half-mast in recognition of Laura Bell, who was murdered in the line of duty protecting our children, the social worker that was killed this week. And I'd love to see any flags the town is in charge of at half-staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from any select board members? All right, so the first piece of unfinished business is the NEA Our Town Grant. And since I was not here last week, I'll ask either Kate, who chaired, or Peter, or both, just to summarize where we currently stand.
I can give the Reader's Digest version.
Yes,
Peter
please.
can do it. We didn't make any decisions at the last meeting. There was one, John.
You're welcome.
There was one proposal that had to be reviewed by the committee because it was inadvertently left off through an email exchange. So we didn't take any action. We waited for you folks to get back, and then I think Peter can give what happened at the SIDS
Sure.
meeting.
Yep. And so the update is that last week the screening committee did meet one more time, did review the one additional proposal. After some extended discussion related to that proposal, decided by a 3-2 vote, actually, yes, by a 3-2 vote. There are 7 members of the committee. 2 members were not able to attend the meeting, so 5 were there. And by a 3-2 vote, they decided not to recommend that one additional proposal for your consideration for finalists. So the committee's recommendation remains the same. It's the 12 proposals that were in front of you last week. As set forth in the procedures for the grant, however, it is your decision as to whether to accept that slate as recommended by the committee or whether to make any modifications in your determination as the select board about which proposals will move on to be finalists. That matter's ripe for your decision tonight. I know there is one person here who would like to speak to that before you discuss and decide.
Can I inquire, just to make sure, since 2 of us were not here last week, the discussion at last week's meeting covered what?
Basically, what Peter did was give us an outline of the process. You know, how many people had applied, how the special committee made their decisions, how thorough they were. So that was really the crux of the discussion, was the process that had gone into getting us where we got to get those 12.
Great.
And where we're going to go from, there.
That's right.
You know,
Right.
with the next committee that's going to be.
I'm sorry, John.
No, go ahead. No.
Yeah, and a slightly different schedule. So based both on the one additional week that we're taking at this stage of the process and on some additional thought as to how the flow can proceed best in September to final decisions and moving on into implementation, we've adjusted the schedule approximately 3 weeks on the far end for the final decision that you would make. It would be in early October to make a final determination of which project or projects to proceed with to implementation. And then there would still be, based on the NEA's approval of our request for a 1-year extension, there'd still be plenty of time for implementation following that.
Does anybody on the board want to speak to anything right now? I know that we have one of the proposers in attendance who wants to speak. Does anybody from the board want to speak before we open the floor to Ms. Lazar?
The only thing I wanted to see was that, and we brought this out last week or whenever our last meeting was, they're all a blur now, was that the decision is going to come down from the selection committee. Basically, the board is just going to take their recommendation. And I wanted to make that clear that we're not picking it. You know, we can if we wanted to, but I think we're trying to leave it up to the selection committee. Is that no?
No, I don't know if we want to make the blanket.
No, it's not a
statement
blanket
about the
statement, but
results.
it's more of a general statement that
Right.
we're taking the advice from the committee.
Donna?
What I would say is after listening to what was a very in-depth overview of how the screening committee did its work and feeling great respect and appreciation for their thoroughness, for the amount of thought they put into how they made their selection, I would be inclined as a select person to accept their recommendations.
See, that's what I was trying to say.
Okay, because I think the way we set this up after the prior breakdown in communication and oversight was to be clear that ultimately it was a select board decision, but that we were going to be appointing various committees and relying on work done by staff and administration to make recommendations to the board,
Right.
but it's the board's decision
Yes.
ultimately what's going to happen.
Yes. Thank you, Don. I should just
Okay.
consult with you first. And
Anything else from anybody on the board right now?
Got rid of our audience.
Oh, they'll come and go maybe. Ms. Lazar, do you want to speak?
Yes, I do.
That mic works for the television, so it doesn't amplify,
Right.
but it,
I don't know that I can stand
you
for that.
can
It's too emotional.
put it down to sit too.
I-
You should say your name.
Yes. Thank you for your time.
Say your name.
Deborah Lazar.
Thank you.
I am a 63-year-old artist. I've lived 2/3 of my life in the Brattleboro area. I moved here in the 70s and done a number of public art projects. I have prepared a tiny little statement for you guys. And then I have some samples of my work. I want to talk a little bit about, well, the reason I'm here today is because I realized that you could choose any one of those 35 or 36 projects. When I submitted, Rod mixed up my proposal. He put the photos for one project in another one and didn't leave the link is in there for the video, but the photos weren't. I can understand if they looked at my first project and said, why is she submitting photos? Because they weren't supposed to be in that, they were supposed to be in them. Anyways, it's all in the past and we're heading towards the future. And really what I want to see is what's best for Brattleboro. But I realize that that you don't have to choose the ones that they chose for you, and you can make decisions on your own of any of the projects. And I just don't want you to not have a look at my project and consider. So, where in the world in Brattleboro is the place for public art? I hope to create and support the arts community in Brattleboro for 40 years, as I said. I've lived in this area. I've done 3 murals, started 1 window art gallery, and I have donated my time to numerous arts and farming organizations, lovingly and joyously, to help raise their bottom line and work with their public relations. And I'm so excited to present my ideas for the people of Brattleboro to learn about their town through art. Because that's what I do. I'm a visual artist. a chronicler, and I do it through painting, video, photography, and graphic design. You might wonder why I'm scrambling around to make this happen, when I know I should be just painting. It seems as though I'm not able to sell enough paintings to make a living, so when a public art project like this comes around, and I already had 2 ideas I've been incubating for 8 years, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you understand what it is I have to offer to the town of Brattleboro. So with that, I brought with me the mini mural. Okay. This is a sketch I made for a proposal to the Arts Council to paint a mural of an idea that came into my head while sitting at the traffic light. I wanted to see what would have been there if the building wasn't there. So we did raise a couple $1,000s, which basically paid for the material and the party. And we had a party in the alley. And if any of you Facebook friends of mine, I posted a bunch of great memorabilia today up on Facebook about that. I do have, this wonderful book of memories from the Carter's Little Liver Pills mural, which is the only one that really survives today. And interestingly enough, this the headline reads Friday, August 15th, 1980. So almost exactly within 4 days of 35 years ago, that was part of a federal grant that fixed up Elliott Street. So one of my proposals, which was a play that I've been working on now for 8 years with my sister, is about the history of Brattleboro. From the settler's point of view, I have a story about the very first woman settler who 260 years ago was captured at Fort Dummer and taken, forced to Canada. And I have the blessing of the Historical Society from Fort Number 4. My sister and I wrote the play, and I thought all the work I do with New England Youth Theater, for sure they would appreciate it, but they couldn't look at it. They'd never had time, and I couldn't find the right director. And I think now, if I had some money, I could pull it together, and I know there are other funding sources to make it happen, but I'm not necessarily saying I want you to pick that one, because to me, these 2 ideas were my Sophie's choice of ideas. Both of them had such great merit. Jemima Sartwell was taken by this attack on Fort Dummer, where this one Indian named Nolka said, "You, mine." And he took care of her, and he got her back here, and he helped her get her family back, and it's a wonderful story about our history. So the other project, which was a book of portraits and landscape paintings of the town of Brattleboro, I had the good fortune working with Orly this year to do a quick portrait sketch of one of our famed residents, Ellen Robb. Ellen Robb, I just met her. And we did this at Catherine Nunn and I did this at the River Garden. We set up, and Orly was so excited about this idea. She said, anything you want to do in this space is fine with me. So we would set up the portrait sessions there, Catherine and I don't know if you've had an opportunity to go to the River Garden and see the painting that was done of Douglas Cox, the violin maker. So those are the kind of paintings you would see in this portrait book. She would be doing most of them. I would be doing some. I don't do a lot of portraits, but I still love it. So this, I just took it out of the freezer. It's not done. And just quickly, this is a quick little portrait I did of my daughter in a restaurant, local restaurant. You probably recognize the background. It's at Fireworks. Juliana. So that's just a sample of my abilities, and so I guess that's about it. The portrait book, which would be public portraits done in a public place. The landscape paintings would be advertised so people could watch it and paint along if they wanted. There'd be a big party at the end, which we did very successfully in the alley when we did the mural. And then it would be published into a book, which would be printed. And I know you have to own something, so you would own the book. I would like to own the paintings, and I would like to keep them in a collection so they could travel. This is our town, and send it to Alaska. So that's my idea for the public art project. And I'm sorry to say I don't know if any of you know where this mural is today, but if you do, I'd like to know. It was taken down when Paramount Building burned in 1989 and taken to the museum for safekeeping. And when they needed to put in an addition, a kitchen, it got thrown out.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's, now, I was contacted by Jim Hayes after that, and he said, you know, I think we have something of yours. And it turned out the center panel, it was done on 3 pieces of marine plywood, so it would last for 25 years. The center panel was kicking around the museum. And he gave it to me, and I immediately gave it to the Historical Society. So that's what we have left of the mural. And this text, which was written by Richard, he's a historian in Canada.
Michael Litt?
I should have his name on it.
Michael Litt?
He's from Hinsdale?
No, Westminster. Well, he was from
No,
here.
somebody else. He had a slideshow about Island Park and the river, and I videotaped him, and I made a 15-minute segment, which is on the link actually on my proposal. And I don't know if you know about Con Flanagan. When the bridge, when the flood came through, he lived on the island and he had a bag of money, and he went out to his house to get that bag of money, and in the night the bridge went out, and so did he with his bag of money. So that's one of the little snippets of Brattleboro information that's on that video, and I apologize because it was, when I turned it into digital, it's very tiny, and it could stand to be remade. It's really just 15 minutes of incredible Brattleboro history. So I guess that's all I have to say. I love this town. I love living here. I'm sure you'll make the right choice for what's best for Brattleboro. I was so excited that maybe there was a chance I could use my talents for something that would really benefit the town. And when I didn't make it past the first round, I was like, this has to be a mistake. Anyway, so you'll make a decision about what you want, and thank you so much for your time. And I'd like to thank every organization that ever hired me or paid me. Anything as long as it's legal. And I was trying to just stay afloat here. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you, Deb.
Thanks. Thank you, Deb.
Oh, and I also have past, present, and future. This is a little painting that I did. It's a present. It's a little painting that I did of the hill by the Kiwanis shelter. And I always wanted to give it to the town.
So
And I
pretty.
was going to just give it to them up there because I used your ice skating rink. Thank you so much.
Well, that's where the skate park's gonna be.
Okay, so I want to offer this as a gift to the town. It's not actually attached, it's just taped on here right now, because I haven't found the right 6-inch frame. But this is my gift to the town, and thank you so much for having that
Thank
beautiful
you.
ice
Thank
skating
you.
rink that I get to enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will get it all framed and then maybe give it to you, or give
Thank
it to
you.
Carol or Lot or the opposite or whatever. I just don't want it to get thrown away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deb.
And this is such a great place to live. It's just, I love it here.
It's not bad.
Yeah. We got everything. Once we got good bagels and pizza, you know?
There you go.
It took a while, all right?
Well,
And now burgers.
oh, yeah.
Take a night with me. Unpack and let you go.
So, any comments or suggestions from anybody on the board?
Anytime you want to look at these scraps, let me know.
Thank you.
There's so much more.
If there's no further comments at this point, then it would be an appropriate time for a motion.
Okay.
That would be the way procedurally to proceed, in the absence of any comments from anybody.
Is
So if
there
you're
a
looking
motion
for
written?
Con Flanagan, I mean, it's bad.
Yes, you have an administrative report, John.
Thank you, Deb.
How about Deb?
Thanks.
Yes, that was a way for all of this, so I guess a couple of questions. So I came back and looked found an email on a Facebook thing, and somebody had put all these up, so I was able to look at all of them. And so I guess, and I actually did see that in its entirety and the video. And actually, I kind of love the idea. But, so I guess my question is, did once that was, and maybe Rod, you might have some information about this too, once it was all together where it belonged, the committee got to look at it, had looked at it, gave it the same thought and care and consideration as the other, same criteria and everything else, and
Yes.
and it's kept the list the same.
Yes.
Okay, great.
The only thing I would say in terms of procedurally how it was different was because it was the one proposal, the day that it was heard, they actually just went directly into having conversation around the one proposal. And as I mentioned earlier, it was a split vote. It was 3-2. There was quite a lively conversation about several aspects of it. And then they came to a decision not to recommend to add it to the list for finalists in terms of their recommendation to you. That's distinguishable, just I'll say really quickly, it was about a 20-minute description of the process last week, so I won't go into all of that again, but for your benefit and David's.
I should have watched it.
No, it's fine. The thing that distinguishes that focused discussion upon this one proposal from how the other 34 were considered is by the nature of the volume of the other. The one meeting when they just looked at all of them, there was a process, a several-step process that the committee went through in first having relatively less discussion and more kind of the initial measure of whether there was strong support or strong reservations about any particular ones. And that narrowed down to that body of 20 or more where there was some significant amount of ambiguity. And they focused the bulk of their energies during the first meeting, which was a six and a half hour meeting. The bulk of the time was spent on the 20 or so out of the 34 where it wasn't clear, sort of based on their own individual opinions being aggregated together, it wasn't clear that there was strong support or strong reservations.
And there were 7 people.
And there were 7 people all in attendance at that first meeting. Yes. And they
6
had-
hours.
They reviewed very thoroughly the ones that they discussed and came to the recommendation of the 12. Then we discovered, unfortunately, that there had been this one that had been inadvertently overlooked, so we had the second meeting, and they focused on just the one, and you know what happened.
And it was 5 people.
And that was 5 people at that meeting and a 3-2 vote.
Well, that's enough for me to I don't know if I guess move to amend the motion to include Deb Lazar so that the selection committee can, as a whole, the entire, she can get the same broad number. Because if one more person had been there and liked it, it would be here. Or 2, it would have been a 5-2 vote, completely different outcome, or 5-4-3. So I guess I'd like to add that and let the selection committee look at it with all the rest of them.
Well, no one's made the motion yet, so we're still waiting for the motion. So if you want to make the motion and
Okay.
include her, that's
I
the
move
way
that we
procedurally to
declare
go.
as finalists for public arts project funded through the Artown grant. The proposal submitted by the following by the registrants listed with the addition of Deborah Lazar.
Which of the 2 proposals from Ms. Lazar does that include?
The portraits.
The portraits. Is the portraits or the play the one that was considered second?
The
The
portraits.
portraits was the one that was considered at the second meeting.
Yep.
So
Comments from
was-
anybody on the board?
Yeah, so what, Rod, was there, because I got from Deb that there was a little bit of miscommunication or was it, and I'm trying to be delicate,
Well,
why
I'll-
can't you, yeah.
Can I phrase a question?
Yeah.
Can somebody explain in 2 minutes what were the strengths and weaknesses as discussed by the screening committee of Ms. Lazar's portrait proposal? And if we have any sense of why the vote was 3-2 against forwarding it on, what was the substance of that decision?
To summarize the concerns, there was some discussion about whether the project of doing the portraits and then turning it into a book was achievable given the budget. And the most deeply held concern was that the work to be done was to be done by Ms. Lazar and a colleague, and so there was 2 portrait artists that would effectively have to spend up, to produce up to 100 finished portrait paintings, and that it was regarded as extremely difficult to achieve that goal in the time period for the project. And those are the 2 most significant concerns.
And there were also concerns expressed, but there was also some debate about those concerns related to the ultimate publication of a book and whether that could be accomplished
Given the
within
time-
given
the
the
time
the
constraints.
time frame and the budget
Yep.
that was established for the grant. So those were the 2 points of concern, and there was lively conversation around both of those points. I will say that I think unanimously or close to unanimously, people appreciated the spirit of the proposal, and the concerns that we heard were not about artistic merit. They were entirely or almost entirely about whether or not the project could be implemented as proposed.
Okay, so the only question I have is, do you feel, because there's 2 people on the committee, on that part of it, that Ms. Lazar got a fair shake?
Certainly. Once we
Okay, that's
resolve the
Yep.
issue of
Okay.
the
Yep,
proposals coming
Yep.
kind of half collapsed, one sort of partially embedded in the other. Yes, I feel like
Okay.
she got, the second meeting was focused on that project, and people were, went to extreme lengths to ensure that it got a fair consideration.
I'm going to say something that's a little less helpful because it takes you back to a place that isn't as clear. I 100% agree that the members of the committee committed themselves to a fair process and lived by that, and both at the first meeting and the second meeting did a great job of listening to one another and their different viewpoints and really fully and fairly considering all 35 of the proposals. Having said that, I think there's a nuance here. They've mentioned it, and I think it's just something that the 5 of you need to weigh as you cast your votes, that because we had a procedural hiccup and because we needed to hold the second meeting and because only 5 of the 7 members were able to come to that one, this sits before you as a 3-2 vote. So 3 members of the 7 on the committee have made the decision at this point about how to recommend it to you. If that, based on that fact, which I think is not insignificant, together with all the rest that you've heard, would cause you to lean towards allowing this to pass through and be considered as one of the finalists, I think that also is perfectly fair in the overall scheme of things and not unfair to any of the others that have been
Good. Okay.
left out
Yep.
at this point.
Any further comments? So, at this point procedurally, we can vote on the motion as presented, which includes the original list plus Ms. Lazar. And if anybody wanted to remove Ms. Lazar's name, they would have to make a motion to amend at this point. Do we have a motion to amend? Hearing none, we have a motion to endorse, what was it, 12 plus 1?
13.
13 proposals to move on to further development and then presentation to the selection committee, which will then make recommendations to the select board sometime towards the end of September, beginning of October. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. I want to congratulate everybody who has had their proposal viewed by the screening committee and forwarded on for further consideration after further development by the selection committee. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who has participated in this process thus far through participation in the screening committee and by submitting proposals, and by even considering submission of proposals. I think this has really been a great step forward from where we stood in the spring, where this process was near collapse, and we'll look forward to continuing to work on this going forward. The next matter on the agenda is the Green Street retaining wall. So, Peter, if you could give us a history of where we stand at this time.
Be happy to. Well, actually, I won't be happy to.
Right.
I'll fulfill my duty to.
Bad news is part of what's on the plate from
That's
time to time.
exactly right. From time to time it is. And I think we have a good way forward, even though we received some bad news. So the bids that came in, we received 3 of them for the Green Street retaining wall. You're well aware we did receive the $300,000 urgent needs grant from the state through the CDBG program. So we were really eager to get that project completed before snow flies this year. However, based on the time frame in which we found ourselves going out to bid, so we would have preferred to be out to bid earlier in the year, but for a variety of reasons, including the necessity of pulling together all the different funding pieces, we were out to bid in midsummer. There's a lot of work going on right now around us, and so the bidders are busy. And we got one bid that would have been a very favorable, very awardable bid in terms of its dollar amount, but it was so far below the others that we received, and the other 2 were not right near each other, but in the same ballpark, that we did some vetting to make sure that it was really an awardable bid, and it turned out it wasn't. The low bidder identified several aspects of the specifications that they felt they had misread, and upon reflection in the communication with the town's consulting engineers, they said, we would need to seek change orders to adjust the price upward to reflect the things that we missed in the bid. We didn't think that would be fair to the other bidders, and we couldn't award to either of the other 2 bidders based on the high prices that were submitted, which we don't think reflect the actual value of the job. We think they reflect the fact that the other bidders are very busy right now and would have to go to some some extreme lengths to pull together the crews and the equipment necessary to build the job in our time frame. Therefore, the consulting engineers recommended, and staff had brought forward for your consideration, agreement with that recommendation, that we reject all bids and re-advertise on a slower time frame, where we would publish our intent in September and hold, in accordance with the schedule that's in your backup, hold an informational meeting, allow plenty of time for the bidders to prepare their bids. It'll be the submission of the bids would be at the end of this period of time, this particular construction season when they've been busy, and well in advance. We'd be first in line, looking ahead to next spring and next summer. So we hope to be positioned just right to get very favorable bids where, they would be lining us up. Whoever would be the low bidder on this job would have one in hand as they look towards scheduling their work for next summer. I think it's a wise way forward. We think we're very likely to come in at the pricing of the job that we expected. And so it'd be in the town's best interest to reject all bids at this time.
Mm-hmm.
John and I can search out some stone.
Yeah.
Any comments or questions from anybody on the board? The one thing I would note is that I think there's been twice now where timing of our going out to bid seems to have impacted the prices that were quoted to us. One we awarded based upon the timing and availability of the funding, and that's a project that's unfolding as we speak. And getting an extension on that grant would not have been possible given the history. But I have spoken about with Peter, trying to develop a process where we're going out to bid way earlier on significant projects so that we're looking far enough ahead so that we're not dealing with availability of labor as something that's driving up costs on projects. And Peter also thought that that was a good idea, and so we'll start moving towards that sort of approach to bidding out projects.
Well, it's a much more, it's favorable for us to do that,
Right.
so yes.
Taking the long-term
I
view.
totally agree.
Right.
But some of the things, we can't help.
Sometimes you
Especially if
can't.
they're an emergency.
But the sidewalk,
Right.
we could have bid out
Oh, yeah,
earlier,
absolutely.
and we probably would have got a better price.
And this wall,
Yeah.
it's stabilized right now, so it's.
It is stabilized. I think
Yeah.
two important points on that are that the Public Works Department did go out and sort of leap into action
Right.
when the wall was clearly inching closer to failure. So they safed up the situation so that we're ready to do the reconstruction, and the project site can sit in its current state safely through this coming winter. So that was a really important piece of sort of emergency action that was taken to tide us over until we could get the funding all pulled together. The second piece of that is it did take a while for us to know that we had enough funds to be able to proceed with the project. Importantly, that led to a delay in when we went out to bid, but the terms of the grant are such that we have until December 31st, a year from now, December 31st of 2016 to construct. So even though it is an urgent needs grant, they anticipate situations like this may arise. So it's been very helpful that, while we waited for the grant to make sure we had enough money, and that is a contributing factor to where we sit today, the terms of the grant also position us to be able to use that $300,000 of state funding and get this work done, hopefully early next summer, but at least definitely during the course of the construction season next summer.
Well, David brought up an interesting point then. Is the grant written in such a way that we can't look at stone?
The project was...
Police fire, if you change it, you can't use the money?
It is like that.
Opportunistic.
We proposed a specific project,
Okay,
and a
yeah.
specific
All right.
project was funded.
Yep, that's fine.
Due respect to
I just thought I'd ask.
preference for...
Who knows, in another year, we may decide not
Got
to
it.
do it after all.
Great. They will decide to close Lower Green Street.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There we
great.
go.
Any further comments from anybody on the board?
Do we have to vote to
Well-
reject all bids?
Peter will
You
talk
actually-
about the.
Yeah, you don't have to. I'm not surprised you raised that question. I've learned that it hasn't been your practice to have the board reject bids. And that's fine, and I'm content to have this be me advising you that I will reject all the bids because I feel strongly that that's the right thing to do. We'll also put this, though, on the list of things that I'd like to take a more careful look at and give you further advice about. I'm more familiar with rules where if we're rejecting all bids for a procedural reason, we may do that at staff level, or if we're rejecting bids on a minor item that is within my purchasing authority of $10,000. But where there's any judgment call that needs to be made and the threshold, we're above that $10,000 threshold, it's been my experience that those decisions are made at this level where you get a good, clear recommendation from professional staff, professional engineering consultants and architects who may be bringing you advice, and from your staff. We would always bring you something fully packaged where we advise what we think you ought to do. But it's been my experience that you would make a decision where we're dealing with something of the magnitude that we're dealing with here.
Makes sense.
And we talked about that as well. And I was comfortable saying yes, then the board will consider it on a motion if somebody wants to make a motion. So is somebody ready to make a motion?
Is there one written up or?
There is. Yeah, that's, Peter's got language there.
Want me to read it since I got it?
Sure.
I move that we reject all bids received for the Green Street retaining wall project and rebid the project in accordance with the schedule proposed by Hamilton Hodgman of Stevens and Associates in his letter dated August 7th, 2015.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. I will announce that we received notice that Barbara Holliday has resigned from and therefore is no longer on the Arts Committee, and that we have various committee vacancies that remain open, including a vacancy on the Arts Committee. So anybody who's interested in serving on any town committee, the town manager secretary, Jan Anderson's got a list of vacancies, and that includes a vacancy on the Arts Committee. I move to enter executive session to discuss contracts and real estate options.
Purchase and lease options.
Purchase and lease options. Hold on a second, I'm sorry. Contracts. Negotiating or securing of real estate purchase or lease options. Where, and appointments.
It's a long
Where
vacation, wasn't it?
premature general public knowledge would clearly place the select board, the town, and people involved at a substantial disadvantage. And at various stages of the executive session, we will invite in Peter Elwell, Patrick Moreland, Rod Francis, Mike Fitzgerald, Mark Carrigan, Mike Bucasi, Peter Lynch, Russell Rice, Steve Horton, and Ray Giolito. Is there any questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. I'll let everybody know at the conclusion of the recorded televised portion that there will be no decisions made during executive session on matters that require public decision, and that we won't be making any decisions or taking any votes except to adjourn after we re-enter public session after rising from executive session. I want to thank everybody who's been watching this meeting. I want to thank the members of the press who've been here to cover us and who participated in making this publicly available. Thank you very much. We're going to be going into executive.